Let me share my screen first. यस, मेरी स्क्रीन दिख रही है सबको? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, as I have told you, we have done with module number 1, module number 2. We are in module number 3. And in this module number 3, we have covered 3.2, that is COTS rule, relational schema, okay, the guidelines. Now, today we can start with the introduction to UML, relational database model. Okay, so this portion, as well as I think even I have covered this also, relational database design, features of good relational database design. Okay, so this portion also I have covered. Okay, relational database design, this portion also I have covered. I think only I have left with the UML. Okay, this introduction to UML and some of the aspects of the UML I need to cover, so that I would be able to complete 3.2. So the third module will be also completed, so that we can proceed towards the fourth module. Okay, so we can start with the introduction to UML. So this, today we are going to see this. You can write down the heading in your register: introduction to UML, relational database model. Introduction to UML, relational database model. Yes, so I've written the introduction. So today we'll be seeing the UML. So what is UML? UML, you can write down the full form as Unified Modeling Language. Unified Modeling Language. Unified Modeling Language. Okay. This Unified Modeling Language, once we understand the introduction of this, then thereafter we can at least have some relationship, or we can correlate this one with ER diagram. With ER diagram. Now we have studied the ER diagram in detail. We have also studied what are the different notations used for entity, for attributes, for relational sets, for entity sets, for showing the relational attributes also. So we have seen those diagrams. Okay. So once we understand the UML, then at the last we can just go through the comparative study between UML and ER diagram, uh, I should not say related, but how they are different from each other. UML and ER diagram, how they are different from each other. Okay, so this thing we can do at the last. So first we should start with the UML. Now when I talk about this unified modeling language, आपको एक बात पता चल जाती है कि this is nothing but this is a language. Okay, so we have different programming language: C, C++, Java. Now in those languages we have to understand the codes, the different the syntaxes we have to understand. Then we have to understand the different classifiers if we are using, functions if we are using, the procedures we are using. So those languages is different than this UML. It is different from this UML. So this UML is nothing but, if I have to give you the understanding this UML, this is your visual language. This is your usual visual language. Now, when you say use visual language, it means this language will be related with your some visuals, some pictorial views will be there. Okay, some views will be there. So this language will be full of pictorial view or representation of a system, or a representation in the form of visuals. Now, if I take a system or if I take a model, those model can be explained by this pictorial representation. Okay, and that is called as unified modeling language. Why it is called as a modeling? Because here we'll be able to describe the model. Here we'll be able to show the behavior of a model. Now here you can say model or you can say system. So this model or system you can represent in the form of visuals, where you will be able to explain the behavior of a model, whether you will be able where you will be able to explain the structure of the model. So whatever you are describing the model, that will be in the form of visual representation. That is why it is called as a visual language. That is why it is called as a visual language. Okay, now visual language, let me give another example. Now when you want to have to build the builder, if the builder wants to build the building, it will first prepare the blueprint. Now when it prepares the blueprint, now this blueprint can be in the form of a map, this blueprint can be in the form of 3D model. Okay, now take an example of a 3D model. Now the 3D model, if it is prepared, it will be near to the the office, the builder's office, where the customers or visitors will be coming, and they will be having a holistic view before the building is made, that how where how the building will look like, how many towers will be there. Okay, where will be the parking slots, where will be the garden, where is the entrance. So all this information will be available in the 3D model. So that is a blueprint of the whole building. Similarly, when you talk about this UML also gives us the visual understanding or the representation of the system, of the software. Now you can also use the word software also. Okay, you can say model, you can say system, or you can say the software. So the description of software, the description of model, or the description of system can be depicted by using the visuals, or by using the representation. Okay, or some diagram. इसलिए मैंने आपको बोला था कि लास्ट में we can have the comparative study about UML with the ER diagram. ER diagram में भी हमने वही चीज देखी है, but this is something different from that ER diagram. Okay, so you can write down one sentence about this UML, that UML, please write down, it is a visual language which is used to understand the system or model. It is a visual language to understand the system or model. It is a visual language to understand the system or model. Okay, it is. Now, say, see the second point. UML has many components to graphically model different aspects of an entire software system. मैंने बोला था you can have software, you can describe the software also. So UML has many components. Now under these many components, we will be seeing this under the heading building blocks. The important building blocks. The building blocks of UML. Building blocks of UML में हम देखेंगे what are the different components. Okay, different components and how they are connected with each other, or how the relationship is shown. Okay, so UML has many components to graphically model different aspects of an entire software system. Okay, so this can be shown in a graphical way, in a graphical model. Okay, so UML has many components to graphically model different aspects of an entire software system. UML class diagrams corresponds to ER diagram, but several differences. This third point is important. Question can be asked to write a short note, the differences between the UML and the ER diagram. This can be understood once you understand the UML class diagram. अभी हम ये class diagram भी जब देखेंगे ना, building blocks of UML, there will be also able to understand the diagrams. तो diagram भी अलग अलग types के होते हैं. So they have given us the class diagram. This is one type of a diagram used in the UML, and how your class diagram is different from your ER diagram. Okay, so to be more specific, we will see how your CD is different from ER. CD stands for class diagram, ER stands for entity relationship diagram. Okay, so we will be seeing this afterwards. So now here we should, before you proceed further, we should be able to understand what is the need of this UML. Why do we go with the UML? Okay, if we have different programming available, then why this graphical representation or pictorial view is important? Okay, there are only two aspects to understand this, first and second. The first one is to save the time, to save time, to save time. Okay, now I have told you that it will give you the graphical representation to understand the behavior, the construction of the model or the system or the software. Now here you should be able to understand that to develop a software, to develop a model, there is not a single person who is working on that. Okay, there are different people from different backgrounds who are working on this. Okay, now you take an example, as we are familiar with the programming language. Okay, so we have a programmer who is developing this model, and there can be some people who are associated with this model but they are not the programmer. So this programmer, how it will be able to show the relationship, or how that will be, that programmer will be able to show the the flow chart or the flow of the program to the non programmer. So in that case, that non-programmer will be able to understand the model. So it's better, it will be understood by the graphical representation or the pictorial representation or by the visual language, so that the time would be saved. So that the time would be saved. So to build up the language, to build up the language, or sorry, to build up the model, if it is well put up in the form of graphical language or visual language, then it is, you can save the time. The 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 development of the model would be more faster, because it will be more understood by everyone. Let me take an example. In the previous, in the during the ancient time, okay, when the people were nomadics, okay, there we were not using the any of the language like we are using today. Okay, so they were either communicating with each other through the sign language, or by the pictures, or by the pictures. Okay, either you can explain by the sign language, or you can be able to see the pictures. So if you see different uh, you know the caves where these pictures will be carved on the wall. So that is the way how the communication is done between the two person. So if the communication is done between the two person in the form of visual language, then you will be able to develop the model in a more faster manner. That is the, you know the rationale behind developing this UML, while developing this UML. So we will be able to save the time. That is more important. We will be able to save the time. And the second aspect is that it is no useful to communicate, useful to communicate, to understand the, to understand to understand the design or model in visual manner. Okay, so it is easier to communicate through the visual language. So second aspect was to useful to communicate, to understand the design or model in visual manner, in visual manner. Okay, so these were the two important needs where UML has emerged, where UML has emerged to develop the model, to construct the model, and it will be easier for the person to communicate with the other by using the visual language. So the need are two, the need are two. Okay, now with this understanding of UML, we will be able to understand, we will be able to understand the next thing, that what are the different building blocks of this UML. If I have to develop the model by using UML, what are the different building blocks, what are the different building blocks? Okay, so we will be able to understand the building. You can write down the heading as building blocks of UML, building blocks of UML. Okay, building blocks of UML. So to develop the UML language, or to develop the model by using UML, we have three important building blocks. The first one, the first one is things. The first one is things. Okay. Now these things are nothing but you can write down in the in the bracket. It is modeling elements. Modeling elements. Modeling elements. Modeling elements. Okay. So the first one is things. Now, what do you mean by think? Which plays an important role for building the model under the UML. Okay, to understand this, under the things, we should be able to understand three things. One is one is structural things. Second one is behavioral things, and third one is your grouping things. You also have some of the books. You will also see the fourth one. They it is not so important, but you can have this annotation. Annotation things. Annotation things. Okay, annotation things. Now what do you mean by things? Now this thing can I can relate it with the entity. Now you know the different entities, like the entity can be student, the entity can be the faculties, the entity can be employee, the entity can be department. So what all these entities we have studied, these entities can be called as a things in UML. You can correlate that entities with things in the in the UML. Okay, so these are the modeling elements. See, without elements, without entities, we cannot develop any of the model in DBMS. It is obvious, because database management system depends upon the elements. It depends upon the entities. So there has to be an entity. So the first and the most important, the block which is required to develop any model, or in that case UML, it is things. That is nothing but your element, modeling elements. Okay. Now if I talk about the structural things, the first one, because these are the different things which are there for developing the modeling elements. If you talk about the structural things, these structural things are nothing but they are the static components. They are the static components. So let me take another page. So when you talk about the structural things, now the structural things actually speak about the static components. Yes, obviously static components, students, then faculties, department, they are all static. Okay, actually when you talk about the UML, these static components or elements, these are nothing but the nouns. स्ट्रक्चरल थिंग्स के सामने आप नाउन लिख सकते हो. Okay, so under this UML, if I have to give the example of structural things, it can be class, it can be use case. ये यूज केस के बारे में हम बाद में पढ़ेंगे. और it can be your interface. Okay, so in terms of your UML, you have these different structural things. Okay, these are nothing but nouns. Okay, the dictionary meaning of noun: a person, a place, or thing. Remember the noun which says about the person, not says, but it is a person, name of a person, name of a place. Okay, so in that case you can see the entity. So structural things, the structural things, that is nothing but the nouns. The second one is your behavioral things. Second one is your behavioral things. Now when you talk about the behavioral things, behavioral, now here you will be able to understand when I am saying noun for structural, because it gives you, it gives you the structure. It gives you the structure of of the entity, or it gives you the structure of a noun which you are using to build up the model. If I am talking about the structure thing as a noun, what could be the behavioral thing here? Would be called as anyone? how it is behaving. So that is called as a behavioral thing. So it would be called as, वहां पे structural thing को हम बोल सकते हैं noun. Here behavioral thing would be called as, in terms of dictionary meaning, or in the terms of adjective. Instead of saying adjective, behavior, वो कैसे behave कर रहा है. You are near to the answer. It is not adjective, but it would be verb. It would be verb. It would be verb. Okay. So what actually your behavioral things will say, it will represent the activity. It will represent the activity between. Can anyone complete the sentence? Activity between. Activity between. There has to be something. The activity which has to be shown between two what? Between two what? Between two. Can I say activity between structural things? Do you agree with this? Between structural things? Yes or no? यस. जब हम स्ट्रक्चरल थिंग्स को नाउन बोल सकते हैं, तो दो नाउन के बीच में क्या एक्टिविटी है, दैट इज डिपिक्टेड बाय बिहेवियरल थिंग्स. Okay. So if I have to show what verb between two nouns, so here behavioral things will work as a verb, and between two the nouns, that is between the two structural things. Okay. So that is called as, if I have to give the example, that is interaction. Interaction. Now this interaction, ये जो मैंने इसके पहले लिया था, class, use case and interface, these are the words mostly used for the UML, which are mostly used for the UML. Okay, the examples which I am giving. So interaction is the behavioral thing. Interaction is the behavioral thing. Okay. Then comes the next one, the grouping things. The grouping things. Now when you talk about the grouping things, okay, now you know that if there are some structural elements or structural things which come under the same category, then it will form the group. It will form the group. So I can say logically grouping similar elements. Logically grouping similar. Here similar is important. Alag alag nahi, the same element or similar elements. Okay. So grouping of the similar element, logically grouping of similar element. Okay, that is called as a grouping things. That is called as a grouping things. Okay. And the last one, that is annotation. Annotation things. In the annotation things, it represents simply the extra information. Jada ka information. Extra information about element. Extra information about element. Okay. So annotation things, it represents the extra information about the element. Okay. So here if I have to give the example which will be used under the UML, it is nothing but it is a sticky notes. Sticky notes आप जो use करते हो ना, sticky notes. So this sticky notes in diagram. Sticky notes in diagram. Which diagram? UML diagram. So whenever we are using the sticky notes in the UML language, or when you are using the sticky notes in diagram, it is nothing but you are using the annotation things. You are using the annotation things. Okay. So annotation things is giving actually the extra information about the element. Okay. So this is about the building block of UML. The first one, that is things, which is called as a modeling element. Things are nothing but the modeling element. Foundation, the important aspect for to develop the model. तो आपको सबसे पहले लगता है elements लगते हैं, modeling elements. Okay. So these modeling elements can be 1, 2, 3 and 4. Is it clear to everyone? Shall we proceed further? Shall we proceed? Yes, sir. Okay. तो हमने देखा बिल्डिंग ब्लॉक में, हमने पहला देखा थिंग्स. अब सेकंड हम देखेंगे, द सेकंड हम जब देखेंगे, दैट इज रिलेशनशिप. अभी आपको धीरे धीरे समझ में आएगा। पहले हमने एलिमेंट्स देखे, अभी हम देख रहे रिलेशनशिप, अभी हम देखेंगे रिलेशनशिप। ओके, रिलेशनशिप्स। ओके, तो रिलेशनशिप अबाउट अमंग्स डिफरेंट थिंग्स, कैन आई से रिलेशनशिप अमंग डिफरेंट? यस, relationship or relation among different things, relation among different things, relationship amongst different things. Okay, so this relationship can be shown either of this 1 2 3 and 4. The relationship can be shown by association, it can be shown by dependency, it can be shown by general generalization, generalization, or it can be shown by realization, or it can be shown by realization. Okay, so the relationship can be shown by association, it can be shown by dependency, it can be shown by generalization, or it can be shown by realization. Okay, so nothing more about this, but just we will see, because this is a visual language, so how these relationships can be shown between the different things, it can be shown in this manner. Now when you talk about association, when you talk about the association, the relationship is shown just by a single link between two things or between two objects. Okay, अगर दो इसमें रिलेशनशिप बताना है तो we can just show by a single link, it is shown by a single link. Okay, between two things. Okay, that is shown as a association. If I have to show the dependency कि ये इस पे डिपेंडेंट है, हमने देखा था द यू नो द एम्प्लॉय के बारे में, जब हम देखा था द डिपेंडेंट्स, हमने जब देखा था डिपेंडेंट्स, ओके, वहाँ पे कैसे दिखाया था ईआर डायग्राम में, वैसे ही अगर डिपेंडेंसी दिखानी है, ओके, सपोज ए डिपेंड्स अपॉन बी, सो ए डिपेंड्स अपॉन बी इज शोन बाय द एरो, is shown by the single arrow, it is shown by the arrow. Okay, here a depends upon b, a depends upon b, b is independent, B is independent and A is dependent. This dependency also can be interpreted that whatever the changes are happening in B will be accordingly reflected in A. That thing, that relationship can also be shown. Okay, that interpretation can also be done, because A B पे depend है, तो B में जो कुछ changes हो रहा है, accordingly there will be changes in A also. Okay, so that relationship also we can show by showing the arrow. Then the next one is dependency, then generalization. Generalization. The generalization is shown by showing the block arrow. By showing the block arrow, there is a difference. See, aisa arrow or block arrow. So generalization is shown in this manner. Generalization means a general, or to be a more specific. Okay, if in the developing of the model, if I have to generalize something between the entities or between the relationship, then that can be shown in the form of block arrow, that can be shown by in the form of block arrow, the relation between the general and specific. Okay, that is general and specific, that can be shown by this block arrow, that is called as generalization. Okay, and the fourth one is realization. Now realization, that is nothing but, you know whenever you have to show the relationship between the classifier, you must be familiar with the classifier. हमने ईआर डायग्राम में भी जब दिखाया था क्लासिफायर. ओके, इन द रिलेशनशिप, इन द रिलेशनशिप, relationship set. Okay, so that is shown by the dotted line, but here it is shown as a dotted arrow. Here it is shown as a dotted arrow, but it is not a dotted arrow, it is a dotted block arrow, it is a dotted block arrow. Okay, that is relationship or relation between classifiers. आई होप यू नो दिस क्लासिफायर. अगर नहीं पता है तो हम जब एग्जाम्पल लेंगे दैट टाइम यू विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड द क्लासिफायर्स. सो रियलाइजेशन relationship can be shown by a dotted block arrow. General and specific relationship can be shown by generalization by showing the block arrow. Okay, then dependency by the simple arrow, and the association between the two objects or two things can be shown by the link. Okay, so that is about the second building block, that is called as relationship building block. That is called as a relationship building block. Okay, with this we are proceeding further, that is towards the third building block, and the third building block is nothing but your diagrams. जब मुझे मेरे पास एलिमेंट रेडी है, जब मेरे पास रिलेशनशिप्स रेडी है, then using the build modeling elements and using the relationship, can I make the diagram? Yes, you will be able to make the visual diagram or the visual language. Okay, so by combining the things with the relationship you can make the diagram. Okay, so diagram is nothing but your pictorial representation of the system. Okay, so diagram will be, can be either, it can be either dynamic model. The diagram I'm talking about, the diagram, it can be your dynamic model, or it can be static model, or it can be static model. Now here we should be able to understand the what do you mean by dynamic model and what do you mean by static model. Okay, here it only means that when you talk about the dynamic model, it will depict the behavior of the model, it will depict the behavior of the model. So dynamic model will depict, it will depict the behavior of the model. So the diagram which is used to show the behavior is called as dynamic model, is called as dynamic model. So what is the static model? The static model depicts the structure of the model. उसका structure पहले क्या है, यानी to show the two, which are the two things. Okay, so that element is called as a structure. So the depiction of that structure is shown by static model. Okay, that is shown by static model. तो static का भी मतलब क्या होता है, that is which is not dynamic, which is stable. So your structure model is stable, but the behavioral can change, the behavior can change. So it is called as a dynamic model. So you have dynamic model, you have static model. The static model will depict structure. Understand this, structure of the model, structure of the model. Okay, so static model will depict the structure of the model. Now in this dynamic model, okay, in this dynamic model there are different, let me write it down, you can also write down. In the dynamic model, in the dynamic model you have different, you know, the types, there are different types. Okay, in the dynamic model there are different types. It can be object, it can be activity, it can be state chart. We will see some examples afterwards. It can be use case. Okay, it can be sequence. Okay, it can be collaboration, it can be collaboration. So these are the types of dynamic model: object dynamic model, activity dynamic model. Understand, we are talking about the behavioral of the model. Okay, so object, activity, state chart, use case, sequence, and collaboration. Okay, these are the few dynamic models. इसके अलावा भी बाकी भी है, but these are the few. Similarly, when you talk about the static model, static model, in the static model also we have types, we have types. Okay, so in static model we have, it depicts what, it depicts the structure of the model. So it can be class, it can be components, it can be deployment. It can be deployment. Okay, class, components, or deployment. So these are the types. क्लास स्टैटिक मॉडल, हमने देखा था क्लास डायग्राम इन द पीपीटी स्लाइड में, देखा था क्लास डायग्राम. सो दैट इज द टाइप ऑफ अ स्टैटिक मॉडल. Okay, so others are components and deployment. Others are components and deployment. Okay, so these are the three important building blocks we have seen. Just in a brief sense we have gone through this. तो हम आगे जब देखेंगे that time it will be more clear to understand what are the different diagrams, what are the different types of dynamic model, what are different types of static model. उसमें हम जब बनाएंगे तब you will be able to understand this. Okay, now I think before I end, I will be just showing you. Yes, I can just show you the ER model and UML. Just go through the ER model and OML. Okay, UML. I won't be able to explain it. I won't be able to, this is not the time to explain you about the ER and UML right now, but just have a view, so that when we'll be doing with the examples, then we will come back to this particular, the diagrams. Can you see here ER versus UML class diagram? Now this is UML class diagram. Remember, it comes under what? Which diagram? Class will come under which particular diagram? It will come under class diagram will come under which particular diagram? Am I audible? Am I audible? So my question is your UML class diagram. So this UML class diagram will come under which? अभी तो हमने देखा था. Yes, static static model. Okay, so we will see this. Just have a view. Your ER diagram. You are familiar with your ER diagram. You are familiar with your ER diagram. Okay. Now here, see the ER diagram notation on the left hand side and the equivalent in UML. When you have to show the entity with the attributes can be simple, it can be composite, it can be multi-valued, it can be derived. So if you have to show this, you will be showing in this manner. But similarly, if you have to show in the UML, it will be shown in this manner. So class, here E is the entity here. So here it is class with simple attributes and methods, attribute prefixes plus, okay, which is nothing but public, minus is nothing but private, and hash is nothing but protected. So हम ये सब देखेंगे. Okay, आपके syllabus में we don't have anything in detail, but it is just an introduction. But just try to understand. यहाँ पे A1 लिखा है, सॉरी माइनस A1 लिखा है, यहाँ पे नीचे में प्लस M1 लिखा है. Okay, so here minus plus hash means what? The prefixes are used to just show that plus is public, minus is private, and hash is protected. Okay, similarly, you are familiar with this particular type of binary relationship. Binary means two entities taking part. So E1 and E2 are taking part. So role 1 and role 2 with some relationship is shown. If it's the same thing I have to show under the UML, it will be shown in this manner. Only two entities, E1 and E2. Can you see a single link is there? Can you see the link? This and the single link. There is an association. Okay. So roll 1, roll 2, and there is R return. Bus. Nothing more than that. So E1 here, E2 here. Similarly, if the relationship attributes are there, can you see here relationship attribute? Okay. Now E1, E2 relationship, then there is a, the attribute of the relationship. that is A1. If the same thing I have to show, then it is E1 associated with E2 with dot dot dot, okay, with dot dot dot. Then here you have written the you have to draw R as a relationship. Uske niche, if I'm using the attribute for the relationship, that has to be mentioned by A1. Okay, that is how it is shown in UML. This thing also you are familiar. Cardinality constants, we write down the number. Okay, we write down the number. So E1 and E2 अगर ऐसा दिखाया है cardinality constant के हिसाब से, if the same thing I have to show, that will be shown in the same manner without showing the relationship, the notation. Okay, so there are few more are there, but that thing I think we can see just after the explanation of some of the examples taken for UML. तो हम जब UML का कुछ एग्जाम्पल देखेंगे, दैट टाइम इट विल बी मोर क्लियर. ये मुझे मैं आपको अभी इसलिए दिखा रहा हूँ, सो दैट यू विल बी एबल टू सी द हाउ दिस ER and UML can be differentiated from each other, because ER also is a diagram and UML also is the visual language using the diagram. So they have given just an example of a class diagram. Okay. Any question so far? Any question so far?
No, sir.
Okay. I think we can start freshly with the examples of UML. Okay, in the next lecture. So we can stop for today. Okay, we can stop for today. If you have questions, please ask. ईशा, ये हुआ है कि देखो अटेंडेंस.
मैं प्रियंका मैम है मीट में.
अच्छा ठीक है.
हुआ.
अच्छा अच्छा. Priyanka, please take the attendance if you are there.
हॅलो.
हा प्रियंका, अटेंडन्स घेऊन टाका.
हो हो घेतली सर मी.
घेतली ना?
हो.
ठीक आहे ठीक. ओके.